Hello and welcome to this webinar on professional licensure and certification of geologists. In particular, today I'm going to talk about AIPG's CPG or Certified Professional Geologist program. I'm Dawn Garcia. I was the 2023 president of AIPG. I'm very glad you're able to join us today and to learn more about this program. This is going to be a recorded webinar, so at the end of it, I'll turn on my camera and we'll take a live answering questions session when we're not recording. These are the topics that we're going to cover today. First of all, starting out about why we're getting licenses and certification as geologists. I'll talk a little bit about the background of who are today's geologists, make an introduction to AIPG. We'll talk about the difference between licensure and certification. And as a geologist, what's the difference between a geologist and a professional geologist? Then I'll talk about how AIPG helps you in your professional career and go through the steps and process of how to become a CPG. So hang on, there's a lot of information that we're going to be covering today. First of all, why do we have licensure and certification? Well, there is a worldwide demand for qualified geologists. The type of work performed by geologists are in the paper every day. We talk about global challenges such as climate change, clean water, water availability, earthquakes, and geologic hazards. These are all of the issues that geologists can address. Although the word geologist is seldom mentioned in the headlines, because we're in such demand, that also means there are strong ethical and social implications, as well as technical expertise to support the specialties of geologists who work in the very broad fields of geology. So we also want to recognize that many of our practitioners work outside of the U.S. And AIPG is not just for citizens of the U.S. It's an organization that encompasses members from over 40 different other countries. So as geologists, we have incredible influence of these projects that impact a lot of people, a lot of public policy and financial aspects. So all of these things mean that our clients, our governments, and the public in general want qualified geologists working on these projects. So who are today's geologists? And I want to bring this topic to light because looking at the statistics about geologists, in 2017, there are almost 400,000 geologists employed in the U.S. And those included educational levels of the bachelor's, master's, and doctorate. And you can see by these different graphs the number of geologists who are in the different categories of education. So it's almost as important to notice that there were as many people with a master's degree and higher practicing as there were with a bachelor's degree. So it's very important to have that technical background. In 2024, however, going from 400K geologists in 2017, we now have fewer than 235,000 geoscientists in the U.S. There's been a lot of change in that geologists are now, people who might have become a geologist are now looking at other disciplines that are related, but not necessarily a classical geoscientist program. Also, we had a big curve of people who came into geology during the 1970s and 80s who are now retiring. So we've got a lot of variation on who those geologists are, but as you can see, we're starting to get into some of the low points from the highs of the 2019. So where do those folks work? Let's talk about the employment sector. So broken up into consulting, meaning professional services, waste management, government, whether it be federal or state government, utilities, mining, etc. This is what it looked like in 2020 to 2021 based on a survey done by the American Geosciences Institute. And one on the left-hand side, you'll see the bachelor's degree. On the right-hand side, you'll see the master's degree. So this emphasizes how broad the field of geology is. People do a lot of work in different sectors doing very specific tasks. And now later on during this presentation, I'm going to talk about competency and particularly how you show your qualifications. So the competency is going to mean that you show that you have the right experience for that particular sector. And so when you see how many people are working in very small niches in geology, you realize that as a geologist, you're going to have to show that you have the right education and experience to be a professional geologist for your task. So in a bachelor's degree, we have 12% working on energy and mining, 24% in a master's degree, and so on with government. And let's go straight on now into the introduction of what is AIPG. So AIPG has been around for over 60 years. It was founded in 1963. It is an advocate for the profession of geology, and there are about 5,000 members worldwide. The primary purpose is to promote high standards of ethical conduct. We also provide certification for professional geologists, so that's the CPG program, but we're going to show you the details of that in a little bit. I also want to emphasize that this certification is recognized not just in the US, but it's recognized internationally. And we have a memorandum of understanding with a number of other organizations that have professional certification of geologists. And our members are geoscientists that practice in all areas of geosciences. So it is not a niche technical organization where it's focused just on one of the disciplines within geology. For example, American Association of Petroleum Geologists is focused on the oil and gas industry, or the National Groundwater Association focused on members who work in the water resources or environmental water concerns. I've mentioned licensure several times. So there's licensure and there's certification. Licensure is in place to protect the health, safety, and welfare of the public. So it is a license like your driver's license that is given by a government agency. So why is there licensing? Well, there were several high-profile building failures that sparked the need to show that people would be licensed. And it really started with engineering and architecture. So building failures like the one that you see the picture on the right, where an entire building has collapsed. Many lives lost to problems where there's inadequate engineering or architecture studies carried out. The licensure within the United States is primarily for the big five professions. That's architects, engineers, geologists, landscape architects, and surveyors. And Arizona was the first state that decided to license geologists working in that state, and that happened in 1956. So since we had licensure starting as early as 1956, why was AIPG formed? Well, AIPG formed specifically when one of the states went to the geologists and said, you guys, as an organization of a discipline, need to do something because we're having a lot of problems with poor quality and fraud. And specifically, it was happening in the oil and gas industry. But as a profession, the geologists were challenged to do something about showing to the public and to government that these geologists are qualified as geologists. So I said that Arizona had licensure in 1956, but there were almost no other states that had licensure at that time. So a group of foresighted persons decided, well, we can respond to this need, and we are going to put together an organization that will show that we are qualified geologists. So in 1963, AIPG was founded. And as I said, they they focused on the geology profession and the qualifications of geologists as a standard of excellence. There had been no other prior organization focused solely on the professionalism for geologists. This this need for having this sort of qualification has become even more important. Um, the example I'm showing on the screen, the Briek scandal, that was in the 1990s, but it truly showed the importance of the financial impact of having unqualified geologists working on different mineral development projects. In Briek, it was an example where there was a fraud taking place for a gold mineral development project. The diagram shows the stock prices, how high they went up, and then how they fell when it was discovered that it was fraud. There's a movie called Gold starring Matthew McConaughey. If you haven't read much about this particular incident, it is very famous, and it also sparked legislation in Canada, which has created quite the financial market in Canada because of the strong legislation that Canada enacted prior to other countries doing so. So what's the difference between this licensure and certification? As I said, it's licensure is permission from the government, whereas certification is granted from a professional organization such as AIPG. In the state where you must have a license to practice, there are state statutes, there's the law, and then the administrative code, which are the rules of how the law is carried out. It's not a federal program in the US or Canada. It is a state by state or province by province. Not all states in the US have a licensure. And the primary purpose is to protect health, safety, and welfare of the public. And there are minimum standards that have been established, such as education, years of experience. And licensure works in conjunction with the Association of State Boards of Geology, or ASBOG. And ASBOG is the organization that prepares an examination, and all the states that have licensure use that exam as one of the minimum standards that you must pass this exam. So certification organizations establish their own standards of the organization, and they can be different between different organizations. It could be at the minimum number of years of education, can be different, or the types of classes that you must take can be different. There is no examination program required for certification, and it is recognized internationally. Your state license is only giving you the permission to practice within that state. There are states that have comity agreements where it makes it easier to take a license from one state and make an application and be recognized in a different state. But your state license, for example, is not recognized in Canada if you're filing filing under one of the public disclosure documents. And the reason for that is that many of the state boards of geology do not pursue complaints against registrants who may be licensed in their state, but they're doing work in a different jurisdiction. So if I'm licensed in Arizona and I do work in, for example, Ohio, I will need to have a license in Ohio. And the state will not necessarily pursue a complaint of work that I have done in Ohio. I mentioned ASBOG. This is just a little bit of background information about ASBOG. That particular organization was established to create a unified approach to licensure. Not all states have licensure. As you can see by the map there, the gray states are those who do not have any licensure, and whereas the ones in green are those who participate in ASBOG and have licensure. So ASBOG was created in the late 1980s, and they have examinations that are developed and validated. They are defensible examinations and have even gone to court to show that the licensure, using this exam, the exam can be validated and verified. So what defines a professional geologist? Basically, it's competence, qualifications, and ethics. So qualifications are things such as a graduate degree, a bachelor's degree, a PhD. That meaning that you've gone through the education to say, I am a geologist. The competence may not mean quite the same, because competence means you have the knowledge in that area of expertise. And you also need to maintain your competency. So sometimes we talk about stale information. So maintaining competency means that you are going to conferences, reading, learning from peers, taking classes, taking short courses, but demonstrating that you're keeping abreast of that technical field that you're saying that you have competence or expertise in. So the other thing are ethics. So ethics are not morals. So ethics are rules of conduct. A moral is your own personal guiding principle, your religious belief, or your upbringing. So as geologists, having an ethical code, you should understand what must be done versus what should be done. Must be done would be things such as if there's a law, a regulation, something that applies in all cases that must be done will be different, whereas you should do it would be a professional practice. So a best practice. So for example, you may want to use the highest standards of something versus the minimum standards. So we have those sort of obligations and practices. There's a lot of different things to talk about when we talk about professional standards, but overall, you should uphold the health, safety, and welfare of the public with various obligations of being accountable, honest, and responsible. So I'm not going to go into those right now, but AIPG does provide ethics training, and there are some other organizations also that does ethics training. There are a lot of benefits from becoming an AIPG CPG. First and foremost is being recognized internationally. So people who work in the mining industry in particular are being asked to sign off or seal the public disclosure reports that mining companies are required to submit. And the CPG status is recognized as part of being a qualified person. So under JORC, which is the Joint Ore Reserves Committee under the Canadian National Instrument 43101 and the U.S. Securities and Exchange Commission SK 1300, those are all various programs that require a qualified person, and the CPG is recognized for all of those. We also have agreements of mutual recognition from professional qualifications. So, for example, if you are a certified petroleum geologist under AAPG or a competent geologist under the EFG, the European Federation of Geologists, Geological Society of London, or the Institute of Geologists of Ireland, there's an agreement where it's relatively streamlined to fill out the application and to be recognized by any of those associations. AIPG provides continuing education and professional development, and AIPG is an advocate for the profession on a global basis. We participate in many committees throughout the world, and we are very concerned about making sure that our members are recognized. That global practice includes members in 54 countries and collaboration with the list of different societies you can see on the screen, starting from American Geosciences Institute, Australian Institute of Geosciences, CRISCO, the EFG, GeoAnsata, Geological Society of London, and so on. So truly, these are the types of collaboration where the decisions about what is the definition of a geologist, what is the definition of a professional geologist take place. And that's part of the support that you'll have within the CPG program. Okay, let's talk about the CPG program and what you need to have in your background in order to apply to be a CPG. I'm going to talk about your education, your experience, and sponsorship, which is the ethics part. So for the education, it's required to have a baccalaureate or higher degree in geological sciences. And the reviewers are going to be looking for completion of core geosciences courses. Many people have gone to multiple colleges or universities, and transcripts will need to be requested from all of those different educational institutes, and those are going to be submitted as to AIPG for the application. There are a couple different things you need to be aware of. So if you did a bachelor's degree and you still think that you need some of the core curriculum, you can also use continuing education courses to demonstrate sufficient coursework. The transcripts from the universities are supposed to be sent directly to AIPG. And because so many people take courses where the course title isn't clear what it means, you should provide a description when it's not a geologic content specific, very clear course title. And if it's a related science, say it says soil studies instead of and we just don't know what these soil studies are. Is it Phados zone? Is it deep soils? What do you mean? You should provide a description. It's really helpful if you keep copies of your syllabus from each of your courses. Otherwise, you're probably going to have to go back and start trying to contact the university and see exactly what was included in the course. For your geological experience, you need a minimum of 8 years or 96 months of professional experience. And that experience is going to need to be verified from employers or supervisors. And there's a form that they will be asked to fill out. Basically, the applicant fills out a little bit of the section on the top so they remember who you are and what you did, and then they verify that experience. You can use credit for an advanced degree. Basically, out of those 8 years, you could have one of those 8 years for a master's and two for a PhD. And you need to show the experience's professional level. And so when you submit your application and you say what your work experience has been, you need to show that you haven't done, for example, well logging for 8 years. You actually need to show that you have progressed in your responsibilities and the type of work that you're doing. There's some specific information in the instructions, so please be sure to read those instructions. What you're going to hear right now is not going to be nearly as in-depth as what those instructions have. The other important thing to know is that you need to talk about what you've done from the time you've received your first degree to where you are now. So, for example, it's been 20 years since you got your bachelor's degree. You need to talk about what you did in those 20 years. And it can be, I was laid off, I was not working, or whatever it is. It's just that you need to explain what you did. And that can be part of a letter. A cover letter is really helpful in those situations so that we understand that, yes, you weren't in jail. Whatever, the thing is that we need to understand what the entire experience has been since you got your degree. And don't hesitate to contact AIPG National if you have any questions about your particular situation. There are a lot of people who have had gaps in their experience, and you just need to explain it. The third part of that application is the sponsorship, and that's the verification of your reputation and ethics. So you need 3 professional geologists as sponsors, and 2 out of those 3 need to be CPGs. If you aren't able to get CPG sponsors, there is a workaround to get 6 professional geologists who know you, know your qualifications, know your ethics and reputation, and they can act as sponsors. Ideally, though, if you live in a state in the U.S. that has an AIPG section, then you should be able to get to know CPG members and then have CPG sponsors. The workaround is really intended for our foreign applicants who may not have enough CPG sponsors in their country or in their region. So on that sponsorship form, there is request email, phone number for the sponsors, and sometimes those sponsors are contacted by the screening committee. So please don't forget to include that information. And if you need help knowing who the local CPGs are in your region, then don't hesitate to contact AIPG. You can also look in our online directory as an AIPG member, and that you'll be surprised sometimes how many people you know that who are also CPGs. So the overall process, there's an online application. This is great. This makes it really easy to get everything filled out. There's no notary signatures. There's you don't have to mail things. Everything can be submitted online. So fill out your online application. You can save it if you get stuck. Request the education transcripts from each of those universities or colleges that you went to. You request that your verifiers submit the geological experience verification forms. So it can be quite daunting to find your geological experience verifiers. So for example, if the company's no longer in business, or if you've had a supervisor who is deceased, we can work with you to make sure that you've got enough experience shown for the qualifications. The key is that you need to have 8 years of experience shown. But I've also seen it. We have members who have applied when they are already senior career folks, and those companies that they worked for when they were in their 20s, those companies no longer exist. So that's understandable. And you also need to request that your sponsors submit their forms. AIPG will then compile all of these documents as they receive them, and they'll make a determination whether or not the application is complete. Once the application is complete, then AIPG submits the entire package to the section screening committee for review. After it passes through the section screening committee, then it goes to the national screening committee for review and determination. And if it's approved, AIPG would then send the applicant the notification of approval and send an invoice for the membership fee. There could be some back and forth during this entire process where you may have submitted something and it's not considered to be sufficient. Whether it's a description of the work done, etc., going back to sponsors, asking questions, etc. It's important, though, that you keep track of who you've asked to do things. So say you have 5 different jobs, you've had 5 different people you've asked to be your geologics experience verifiers, and ask them to let you know when they submit their forms. It's a lot of times somebody will be asked something and you've just assumed that something was submitted, it's never been submitted, and then you're waiting 9 months later and wondering why you've never gotten any notification from AIPG. AIPG will not notify you when each document is received. They simply compile the documents until they can check the boxes that, oh, everything that you said you were going to submit has been received at headquarters. So track all of those submittals, track your transcript requests, and then verify with AIPG that all documents have been received when you understand that everybody has submitted everything. So once everything is approved, you've paid your membership fee, you'll pay the membership fee for the section and the national dues, and you'll sign an ethics declaration. It's a lot of information, and I understand that it's a lot of work to put it all together. I've also had the different regulatory agencies say that, well, we really appreciate that AIPG has been so diligent in doing all of their verification to show that this person is qualified. So that's why the AIPG CPG is considered to be such a high standard. It takes work, and there's a lot of depth to what we look at. So this is the page of the website where you start filling out the application form. There are some suggestions there of things to read. We'll be posting this recording, and we'll also be posting the the slides so that you don't have to listen to me talking. The next time you want to look up something, you can just look at the slides and you'll see some of the tips and everything. The geological experience verification, this is the form. So please note that the applicant fills out part of this form. So all of this information on the second page, you're going to be filling that out. You're going to talk about what you did. And then the verifier is going to look at that and say, ah, yes, okay. This all looks like what I remember also. I'm familiar with this. I can verify that this is what that person did. So, and please don't forget that we actually need some true descriptions of what you did. You can't just say, oh, I worked for a consulting company and we did groundwater work. No, you need to talk a little bit more about what sort of work that you did. And as you can see at the bottom of that second page, it says upload the form link. So everything can be uploaded, and you also have the option of just emailing it if for some reason someone has any problems with the upload, the button or the link there. Here are some additional tips. Make sure you explain everything of your geologic and other experience so there aren't gaps in your work history. Demonstrate that you've gone from, say, early career professional to a professional by showing that you were the responsible person in charge of work, making decisions. Verify that you have at least a minimum number of years to qualify. So 8 years of experience, and you can show that you have the credit for your advanced degrees. As I said earlier, if you have a long work history, we can work with you to make sure that we get sufficient verification to show that you're a professional geologist, even in the case where supervisors may not be able to provide verification. And we also occasionally have people who are self-employed. So verification can be provided by a client or a regulator who is familiar with the professional work of that applicant. Ideally, it comes from a supervisor or a coworker when working for a company, but many geologists are independent, and having a client or a regulator be the verifier is also acceptable. This is what the sponsor statement looks like. So again, you are going to need to have some of this information. I would fill it out myself to make sure that you have that information, and then let your sponsor fill out the rest of it. You can download these forms and send it to them. But if they don't fill out the form completely, then it's going to be very hard for us to go back and ask them for additional information, especially if we don't have an email address or a phone number. For our foreign applicants, it can be particularly challenging coming from a non-US university. We understand that transcripts from schools are not always possible. In that case, contact the AIPG office and let them know what the situation is. Also, finding CPGs in other countries can be more challenging. So we have that workaround of the 6 professional geologists. Again, it's very helpful to contact the AIPG office, because sometimes there will be someone who works in that country, maybe doesn't live there full time. And there would be an opportunity to then for them to know a CPG. If you have problems with the supervisors, not being able to verify them, or if there's some other issue, then please contact AIPG, let them know what the situation is. For the foreign applicants, especially, all applications are to be completed in English, and we've assumed that any applicant who is applying for CPG has a working proficiency in English. There may be documents that are not in English that are submitted, such as transcripts or sponsor statements, etc. So the applicants should also submit translations for those documents. And if you don't know whether or not the documents were received in another language, then again, that will be a good time to contact AIPG when you say, I know someone has submitted information, and does it need to be translated? That would be a good question. Lastly, I just want to emphasize that AIPG has a lot of great benefits. We did a survey a couple of years ago and asked our members what they thought about AIPG membership, and took some quotes from those responses, and I put them here to let you know that this is not what I think about AIPG, but obviously what others think about it. And I encourage everyone to fill out that application, get their CPG, and we're going to stop the recording now and go on to a live question and answer session.